And the tragedy with BEE, of course, is what The Economist reported on yesterday, that the aim is to improve opportunities for all South Africans. But what we've seen after decades of BEE is that a very small group of Black people has become very much richer, and 50% of Black people have become poorer.
Is the tide turning against BEE? South Africa's Black Economic Empowerment Framework places a number of onerous burdens on businesses operating in the country, but 3 separate developments suggest that common sense may be prevailing when it comes to BEE regulation. Joining me to discuss is Anthea Jeffery. She is the head of policy research at the Institute of Race Relations. Anthea Jeffery, always good to have you here with us on the CRA channel. Could you tell our viewers about these 3 separate cases and what they suggest about attitudes towards BEE in the country at the moment?
Earlier this month, the Gauteng High Court ruled in a very important case for BEE in mining that the Minerals Charter, which was developed in 2018, is not a binding legal document. It's simply a policy document. Therefore, it's not binding on the mining industry. And therefore, the government can't at this point require mining companies with existing mining rights to enter into new BEE deals if their previous partners have sold out and they now want to transfer or renew their rights. And that's a very important thing, because the fear of having to do constant BEE deals was a major obstacle to investment in the mining industry. And at least that part of the BEE regime has been struck down by the Gauteng High Court. And then if we move on to the other 2 developments, again, we've got one in the courts. The Supreme Court of Appeal has recently ruled that the tourism minister was wrong to impose a BEE requirement and handing out 200 million in relief at the time of the COVID pandemic lockdown last year, because there's no requirement whatsoever in BEE legislation that relief should be subject to BEE requirements, and no such element in the Disaster Management Act either. So the minister was really heading off without law to back up her view, and the courts have brought her back into line. And thirdly, we have a recent decision of the Competition Tribunal, which is relevant to BEE too, because it has just given the go-ahead to the sale of Burger King to an outside company willing to bring money into the country. And that deal was previously blocked because it would have brought the existing Black shareholder in the Burger King franchise down from 65% to 0%.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
Does this mean that there is significant pushback against BEE in general, or do you think that these are kind of more small aberrations?
I think that what they really indicate is that important adjudicatory bodies are looking more carefully at what our law or policy in fact requires in terms of BEE. So very much in the Mining Charter case, there is no authority in the Mineral and Petroleum Development Resources Act giving the mining minister the supposed power to make law via the Mining Charter. And the courts have now reminded the minister of that, which is a restatement of the law, a reaffirmation of the separation of powers, and therefore an important reaffirmation too, that the courts will apply the law as it is, and not perhaps as some BEE proponents would like it to be. And very similar with the tourism issue, where again, I think there was a great deal of concern that many of the small companies that were going to the wall in the tourism sector might not have black owners, but they did have 95% or so Black staff. So potentially you had an enormous blow to Black people through the collapse of the companies that they worked for if the government wasn't willing to provide relief. And you have there in the court saying, but we must look at what the law says. And the law does not authorize the tourism minister to do what she wants to do. And we are going to hold the tourism minister to what the law requires of her. And that again is an important reaffirmation of legal principle. In the context of the Competition Tribunal, the initial decision was made by the Competition Commission. What public policy requires in the competition sphere is very uncertain, particularly as regards BEE. The Commission recognized there was no competition issue. They simply wanted to exercise their powers to shape public policy and say that they couldn't agree to a deal that would reduce Black ownership in this way. But that's not what they were required by the public policy element in the Competition Act to do. So it looks as if they have been willing to adjust their view of what public policy requires and what is best for South Africa in order to improve opportunities for Black people. Because now that that deal can go ahead, there will be many more outlets, there will be many more people taking on, there'll be more salaries paid, and it's Black people who will benefit primarily from that. So it's very good that a mistaken view of what BEE policy requires has not been allowed to stand in the way of some increased opportunities for ordinary South Africans. And the tragedy with BEE, of course, is what The Economist reported on yesterday, that the aim is to improve opportunities for all South Africans. But what we've seen after decades of BEE is that a very small group of Black people has become very much richer, and 50% of Black people have become poorer. And that's partly because of BEE, because it deters investment, as it has in mining, as it would have in the case of the Burger King issue. And it makes it much more difficult to generate the jobs that we need for the 10 million people, Black people, who are now unemployed.
Last week, we had the Minerals Council speaking about this matter on the CRA channel, and they were very polite not to overtly criticize the broader BEE regulatory regime, but they were obviously celebrating this particular court judgment. Why do you think that business has been so equivocal in pushing back against some of these more restrictive requirements, given that essentially this does end up inhibiting much of their activity?
I think businesses had a sort of understandable incentive to go along, to get along, that it's a difficult thing to confront the government, and particularly when you need to obtain your next mining right or environmental permit and so on. It's much... it probably, there's a feeling that you can smooth the way by being supportive of policies like BEE, even though the mining industry must be extremely conscious of how badly the industry has fared since the NPRDA came into force in 2002. At that point, South Africa attracted 35% of the mining investment that came into Africa. Now it attracts less than 8% of that investment. So though existing mining companies can continue, we really are not seeing the new money coming in, the new mines being developed, that we need to keep the industry vibrant far into the future. And that's very much linked to the NPRDA and the mining charter requirements and how the BEE codes have constantly been ratcheted up. And though one understands the mining industry's reluctance to speak out, the fact is that these laws are not helping the great majority of Black South Africans, and we need a fundamental rethink.
And what would alternatives look like there, Anthea? Because there seems to be a sense that this is the only game in town, but your research has suggested that there are many other potential ways in which people could be uplifted from poverty.
We've suggested a shift from BEE to what we call economic empowerment for the disadvantaged, with first of all a new type of charter with a different kind of measurement score. And again, this would be voluntary, it wouldn't be the law. But mining companies, for example, would then get points for all the investment that they make in the country, for all the investment that they attract from elsewhere in the world, for all the people that they employ, and even more so for any additional people they're able to employ, for all the taxes that they pay themselves, and for all the PAYE that goes to the government based on their employment profile, for all the innovation that they generate, their research and development spending, for the contribution that they make to exports, which helps to strengthen the rand and to hold inflation down. These are all terribly important economic contributions that mining makes, and we believe that mining companies should get EED points for this, because this is what makes a real difference in the lives of real people. And then to bring it right down to the grassroots level, we would also suggest that we have, for example, the introduction of education vouchers, where a lot of the money that is so badly spent on basic education at the moment would be transferred into the hands of households below a certain income level, so that they could choose what school they would like their children to go to. And then schools would have to compete for the custom of those parents, and they would have an incentive to up their game and do very much better in order to attract that custom. And we believe that sort of approach, where we incentivize the private sector and we utilize its skills, would do very much better in expanding opportunities for all Black South Africans, which must be the key goal.
Anthea Jeffery, thanks for joining us on the CRA channel. Let's hand over to you, our viewers. What is the impact of BEE on South Africa's economy? And do you think that these three cases are cause for optimism in this regard? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video and also subscribe to the channel for more updates every weekday morning from the CRA team. My name is David Ansara. Until next time, take care.